On the 4th of July 1982, a young woman named Cynthia Loucille Baillie, fondly known as Cindi, was lured to her brutal death by her ex-boyfriend Greg, his current girlfriend Teresa, and his mother Lois. Lois being the instigator and main perpetrator of the horrific torture and eventual murder which ensued on that fateful day. Hey guys, I'm Natasha Diamond and this is The Final Feast. I love true crime, not gonna lie. I love to bake and I have a weird obsession with what convicts choose to eat as their last meal on death row. So that's what I do over here. I cook their last meal and I tell their story. All the recipes that I use will be linked in the description box below. So if you want to have a go, then of course try it out and let me know how it goes in the comments section. Today I'll be making Lois Nadean Smith's last meal on death row, which was barbecue ribs, onion rings, strawberry and banana cake and cherry limeade. So without any further ado, let's turn up the heat on Lois Nadean. Why can't I say this? So let's turn up the heat on Lois Nadean Smith. Lois Nadean Smith was born on the 12th of September 1940 in Tahlequah, Oklahoma in the USA. She was born to parents William and Dolly Dodd and had an older brother named Phineas. Throughout her life, Lois had a reputation for having a bad temper and being a bully. It was in her high school years that she acquired the nickname Mean Nadean. After obtaining a high school diploma, Lois went to business school where she completed a course in business machines. Throughout her 20s, Lois had jobs as a bookkeeper for multiple companies, but eventually she became a secretary and principal bookkeeper for a lumber company that she had been working for a number of years. Then, at 35, she was promoted again to assistant supervisor of secretaries and bookkeeper. She married a man called James Smith who went by the name Jim. In one article I read that she had 4 children and 1 stepson, but I could only find the name of one of her sons, and that's the one that's involved in today's case. This was James Gregory Smith, who went by the name Greg. He was 18 years old in 1982 when the murder took place, so if my calculations are correct, he was born around 1964. According to Lois, her husband Jim was a violent alcoholic and she sustained many injuries throughout their marriage, which eventually ended in divorce. When Greg was 18, he dated Cindi Baillie for a short period of time. Cindi was born on the 17th of November 1961 in Los Angeles, California. At the time, she was 20 years old and a loving mother to her 4-year-old daughter, Bailey. Greg was a drug dealer and Cindi was well aware of his criminal activity. The relationship soon fizzled out and Greg began dating a new woman named Teresa Baker. Shortly after the split, Lois and Greg claimed that rumours had been circling regarding Cindi. According to them, she had been telling people about Greg's involvement in illegal drugs and threatening to go to the police with this information. There was even word that she had been trying to arrange for Greg to be killed in a murder-for-hire plot, although there is no evidence to support these claims. The rumours angered Lois immensely, so in an effort to protect her son, she arranged a crime of revenge so cruel and sinister, Cindi would never be able to carry out her threats. On the morning of the 4th of July 1982, Greg drove his then 41-year-old mother Lois and his girlfriend Teresa over to a motel in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, where Cindi was staying. They managed to convince her to go for a drive with the 3 of them. Cindi sat in the back with Lois, who pretty quickly began putting on gloves. She confronted Cindi about the rumours, but Cindi refuted all accusations. This didn't dishearten Lois as she began punching Cindi repeatedly. Whilst this was happening, Greg found a knife in Cindi's bag, which he passed to his mother. She choked her for a while before eventually stabbing poor Cindi in the neck and twisting the knife. The group then drove to Lois's ex-husband Jim's house in Gans, Oklahoma. At home was Jim and his wife Robin, but Robin left shortly after they arrived. Lois held Jim at gunpoint and instructed him to wait in the bathroom. She then forced Cindi into a recliner in the living room and began taunting her with a gun, threatening to kill her. It is said that Greg and Teresa were in a different room during this time. Eventually, Lois shot Cindi repeatedly until the gun was empty and she fell to the floor. Greg then entered the room and reloaded the pistol with bullets as Lois laughed and stomped on Cindi's neck. When the gun was returned, she fired 4 more bullets, ending Cindi's life. A coroner later revealed that Cindi had sustained 9 gunshots to her body, including 5 to her chest, 1 in the back, and 2 in the head. 5 of the shots were fatal, and the knife wound in her neck was also potentially fatal. Around 9 a.m. that morning, neighbours were alerted to the gunshots and called the police, but when law enforcement arrived, they were greeted at the door by Jim, who assured them that the noise had come from fireworks. The police left the scene without investigating further. This gave the group time to attempt to clean up and move the body into the bedroom. One source suggested that Lois had placed the gun in Cindy's hand to make it look like a suicide, although this would have immediately been unbelievable to investigators, considering the brutality of the murder and placement of Cindy's body. Eventually, the group gave up on their attempt to clean up, and all 4 of them left the property. Neighbours were still concerned about all the commotion at the house, so police officers were sent back to the property later that day. On their return, they found that the door was open, but the house was abandoned. It was then that police discovered Cindy's lifeless body. Investigators quickly narrowed down the suspects to Lois, Greg and Teresa, who were arrested that very same day. Teresa confessed immediately and told detectives everything in exchange for immunity. This meant that she had to testify in court against Lois and Greg. The courts appointed Lois and Greg the same legal representation. Sometimes this can cause conflict of interest, but as their stories were similar, both agreed to keep the same lawyer. Lois's defence being that she was under the influence of drugs and alcohol at the time of the murder and was trying to protect her son. However, just before the trial, Lois changed her story, stating that it was in fact Teresa who had shot Cindi in a jealous rage. Teresa, of course, contradicted this with her story, which was similar to that of Lois and Greg's original statement, that she was in fact out of the room when the murder occurred. Forensic evidence also supported the fact that Lois had fired the gun by the blood spatter on her clothes. Lois was sentenced to death by lethal injection and Greg was sentenced to life in prison. He was released in 2009. Lois appealed the verdict on 2 occasions in 1986 and 2000 on grounds that there was conflict of interest with her son being represented by the same legal counsel. She claimed that she'd encouraged her lawyer to emphasise how manipulative Greg was and how he'd instigated the attack, but evidence to support this was withheld. She also argued that other mitigating evidence had not been admitted during the trial, including her alcohol abuse, her ex-husband's domestic violence, and the fact that a psychological evaluation had never been done. Both appeals were rejected, and Lois Nadean Smith was executed on the 4th of December 2001. She was the 3rd woman to be put to death that year in Oklahoma. In her last words, she expressed remorse and apologised to Cindy's family, but that will never bring back the mother that Brandy lost at only a mere 4 years old at the hands of this evil woman. For her last meal, she had barbecue ribs, onion rings, strawberry banana cake, and cherry limeade. If you've made it this far, then thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It kind of got me thinking about the first ever video I did with Teresa Lewis, how she didn't actually commit the murders, but she still managed to get herself sentenced to death, whereas the 2 accomplices who actually pulled the trigger, they get life in prison. Like, I know it's different states and different laws and there's a million things that go into it, but it's just funny how Lois got sentenced to death, but her accomplice Greg didn't even get life in prison. Is it just to do with the laws in the different states, or something to do with the fact that they're both women and it's not in their nature? I don't know, just something to think about. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, then please give me a comment and give me a like and a subscribe. I'll be here serving up more true crime next week, so of course hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss out, and until next time, enjoy every meal as if it was your last.